here. I'm very happy and excited to have Nivendra Uduman here with us today. Nivendra is the co-founder of the Ohana project, which was very active after the attacks in April and has been active before that as well. The Ohana project is a group of mental health professionals who are very passionate about spreading more mental health awareness and advocating for better mental health in the community. So, Nivendra, could you tell us a little bit more about the Ohana project and what inspired you to start it?
So the inspiration behind wanting to start the Ohana project was actually when my friend and colleague Nilushka came back from the UK after finishing her studies, and we wanted to do something together, something different and new. And we also wanted to engage with like-minded mental health professionals who are, coming up in Sri Lanka from different sectors in mental health. So not just psychology or clinical psychology per se, but from all sorts of backgrounds. So we have a team of about 10 professionals in our team at the moment, and the inspiration was and the idea was to really engage with communities all around the country and not just focus on the urban setup, and also our main aim was to leave no one behind in terms of resources and information around mental health and how that information and awareness spreads to people who wouldn't have access otherwise. So that's was our main kind of aim in starting it. And initially we were doing a lot of training programs as well for healthcare professionals and the lay community, but these days we are focusing a lot more on awareness raising and advocacy.
Thanks, Nivendra. It's actually really good to see work being done in the mental health field, because it's often an area which is a taboo. People don't want to talk about it, and so it's really great about the work Ohana Project's doing is really, really great. And I just really wanted to know about your experience and your co-founders' experience and how that helps, train other people in the mental health field.
So I am a counseling psychologist and psychotherapist. I've been practicing in Sri Lanka for the past 5 years. I had my education in India, and since I've been I came back in 2014, and since then I've been doing a lot of capacity building and training for mental health professionals and also the people in the community, and also running my own independent practice. So my experience largely comes from working in the community, so I really enjoy going out into the field and working with people, training people, and mainly empowering people to do their own thing, to run their own groups, to take care of their own well-being in their communities, and to be able to support each other in times of crisis or in times when things get difficult, rather than always kind of rely on professionals to help you, because sometimes it's not as accessible as it might be in Colombo, for example. So my co-founder comes from a public health background, and her main interest areas are research and also how research and mental health they come together, maternal mental health. So she has a very also specific areas of interest where, so both of us we come together nicely, where I enjoy the more doing part and she enjoys the more planning and the setting up of things and the admin side of things, the monitoring. So we kind of complement each other in different ways. So she holds me back when I want to jump in. So it's a good combination.
Great to hear that. And can you tell us a little bit about the state of mental health in Sri Lanka? Is our mental health issues increasing, or are they the same level, or are people talking about it more?
So I mean, technically it's a bit of a difficult question to answer, because there's no proper data to say whether mental health issues have increased or are more people being diagnosed or hospitalized or etc. because of mental health issues. But if you look at personal experience of seeing people at a clinic, or just what you hear from your friends and other professionals, I would say in the recent past there definitely has been a spike in mental health issues around the country, and I'm seeing that in a lot of young people these days, that there's a lot of mental health issues that are increasing where it's affecting young people. But the thing is, we don't always have access to proper data to know what's really happening. But also if you talk about, for example, suicide rates, we know that since the 90s we have had a decrease in the number of deaths that have occurred because of suicide. But in the recent 2 or 3 years, so from 2016 ish onwards, we've also seen a slight spike again, which is a bit worrying, and in the number of attempts, right? So these are a bit worrying. So I would say, yes, there is an increase, but the increase is sometimes we don't see it happening, in front of us. But if you really look at the community, I think there is.
There is.
Yeah.
Okay. So, research by the World Health Organization states that mental health illnesses affect 1 in 4 people worldwide. So, it's very likely that someone one of your friends or someone in your acquaintance is suffering from this internal battle. So, how can we spot early signs of mental health related illnesses?
I think that's a really important question, because the earlier we spot, or the earlier we encourage people to seek help, the better outcomes people can have in recovery. So if you talk about early signs, I think one of the first things to look at is whether a person withdraws from their social circle or their family or friends, and not really engaging as much as they would usually do, and not being really so talkative, not being outgoing as if that person was outgoing naturally. So withdrawing and also sort of isolating oneself is one of the first signs that you might see. And then people also experience changes in their moods, right? So some people might have mood swings pretty quickly, where at one moment they're happy and smiling, and the other moment they might cry, or they might just appear to be really low. A lot of people complain about a lack of energy, not feeling energetic to do things, feeling tired very easily even though you're not really doing much. People would complain or report saying that they feel drained. So those are signs to watch out for if there is no real reason to be tired all the time, right? So especially a lot of people also say in the mornings when they wake up, even after having a good night's sleep, they would feel really tired, feel really heavy. So those are signs to watch out for. Then one of the first things that starts to decline is one's personal hygiene. So the things like washing, brushing, all of those things, or washing one's clothes would kind of take a backseat if someone is experiencing a mental health problem, because that might be difficult for them to do. Relationships might experience problems where people might seem irritable, people might seem snappy, people might not kind of tolerate another person as much as they normally do. So things like that we can watch out for. They might feel worried or look worried and appear to be confused, right? And you might also notice people experiencing fear, where they might be worried about what can happen in the future, or whether something bad will happen. So there's constant thoughts going on about worry mainly. So those are some of the key signs to look for. And also in their appearance. So people generally stop paying a lot of attention to how they look or what they wear. So grooming takes a backseat as well sometimes. So if you notice changes of them not really looking after themselves, their eating habits changing, where they're not really paying attention to food, not wanting to eat a lot, skipping meals sometimes, or sometimes even eating a lot more than they normally do, especially of carbs and sweets and things like that, you might want to just have your alarm bells ringing in your head. Plus, of course, sleep problems. If someone complains saying they can't sleep, or they're not falling asleep, they're waking up in the middle of the night, or feeling really drained in the morning. So those are some key signs to look out for. And the physical signs as well. So unexplained headaches, a lot of aches and pains in the shoulders, behind the neck, gastritis that is unexplained. So some of those things might be things you want to look at as well.
Yeah. And thanks, I think. Thanks, Nivendra. I think that was really useful for even for me to understand. And there are definitely times when you see that happening. So what's the first thing you can do when you see something like that happening? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the very first thing to do is to really notice it and not dismiss it, to acknowledge it, saying that, okay, I see a change in my friend or family member, and not just say, it must be just a phase, but really pay attention to it. And then I think the most important thing is to ask the person whether they're okay, right? So now this is something a lot of people have difficulty with because they wonder, how do I start the conversation, or will it be awkward if I ask, or will the person get offended? So a couple of conversation starters, if you might say, you can say something like, if I'm talking to you, I might say, Semal, I've noticed that over the past couple of days you've not been looking so great. Is everything okay? Or I might say, hey, yesterday I noticed you were looking really down. Is there something going on? Would you like to talk to me? So things like that you can say to start a conversation. Rather, because sometimes it can feel really awkward to just randomly ask someone whether they're okay. But something like this, saying you've noticed something or you've noticed a change, and it also shows the other person that you care. And it shows the other person that you're genuinely interested in listening and helping the person. So yeah, I think the first step is to ask.
Thank you for that. Actually, that's really helpful because a lot of the times you don't know what to say when you see something happening. A lot of people go into this like, I don't know what to do kind of stage. And so actually I want to pick up on one of the, I want to talk about triggers next. And you talked about sleep deprivation. Now, especially in this startup culture, we are encouraged to like you have Elon Musk who sleeps 4-5 hours a night, and you have many other entrepreneurs who are working 20 hours a day. And I just want to know what effect can that have on your mental health?
Yeah, I think as a whole we are a sleep deprived culture in Sri Lanka and in other countries around the world. So if you look at it, especially from the point of view of a startup, I think, or a tech kind of a situation, a lot of people have this notion that the more hours you work, the more productive you are, the more hours you work, you get things done. But the reality is that when your brain and your body is not rested and according to the hours it needs, you're not going to be productive. It's simple as that. Even though we believe that staying up or working late into the night or even working the whole day is something that you need to be proud of. It's like, wow, this guy is really committed. And sometimes even bosses of companies feel like, wow, this guy is really committed. But the real fact is that the person may be also putting their health at stake. So there's this pressure and enormous sort of what shall I say, shift in how people look at sleep. So sleep is looked at not as a healthy thing to do anymore, or not as a necessity, but more as like a luxury, right? So if I have the luxury to sleep, wow, but if I don't, then I got to stick. Especially this happens in the corporate culture where one believes that staying up means people would also admire you, respect you. Maybe you might get better, promotions or whatever if people see you working hard. But the fact is, in the long run, it will affect them. So sleep deprivation definitely is one of the main things that has an impact on your mental health. Especially if you look at things like anxiety and depression. If a person doesn't get enough sleep, or if sleep is kind of really poor for a long period of time, there's a very high chance of a person developing a mental illness, because sleep is necessary for the body and the brain to rejuvenate, right? And also it leads to what we call burnout in a corporate startup culture. That is one of the key things that can happen because of sleep deprivation. So I think sleep is something we really need to look at seriously, and to sort of again restructure the way we understand sleep and why sleep is important for us. So to answer your question, Semal, I think it's one of the most key things in Sri Lankan households and Sri Lankan corporates that we experience is this sleep deprivation. Now, if you look at a typical Sri Lankan mother, right, you will find her going to bed usually at about 12, 1, and maybe waking up at about 4 again to prepare for the next day. So a person is getting about 4 hours of sleep, which is not ideal. But we have this culture that a mother also, it's like a startup, a mother also needs to somehow bear it and kind of go through the motions, just like how someone in the startup world would think, I have to, sleep is not important, I have to go through the motions. So yeah, I think we really need to look at that again as a culture.
So I think what you said was very interesting, even as a mother. So I'm a mother myself. I have a 1-year-old daughter, and I know that sleep. I think as a working woman, it's like especially when you're working, you're doing everything in the house. You're taking care of the baby, plus you're coming to work, and I think it's very true that sleep is one of the things which gets affected, because how do you make time for everything that you're supposed to do? So thanks a lot for really bringing awareness to sleep and the importance of sleep. The other thing I wanted to, and you touched upon this, like two of the biggest mental health issues just with volume is depression and anxiety. Anxiety is something I feel a lot myself as well, to be honest. And I have noticed that just with how we're constantly bombarded with things, either with social media or news, or there's always negative news shared. With social media, there's always this anxiety of other people are doing a lot more, I'm missing out. And I feel like in society there's a normal, like anxiety has almost become a new normal, and I just wanted to learn a little more. I'll get your thoughts on that, and what can you do when you feel very anxious.
Yeah, I think what you said was really true, that anxiety has become the new normal, because if you really look at least if you look at the urban setting in which we live in, anxiety seems to be this thing that almost everyone you meet seems to experience, even though there might be exceptions. So anxiety on its own is something normal for all of us to feel at different times, because it's basically a way of kind of protecting us from threat, or warning us of threat, or activating what you call a fight or flight response, which is our body's, our mind's, brain's basic way of protecting us from danger, right? So that is ingrained in us, that response. But the thing is, some of us biologically, and because of the environment that we surround ourselves with, are more vulnerable to develop what we call an anxiety disorder, where anxiety becomes at a level where it interferes with your day-to-day functioning, it interferes with your work, it interferes with school for a kid, it interferes with your relationships, right? So that is when anxiety becomes a problem. But otherwise, it's not something that should be termed as an illness, because you and I will experience it in different levels. Right? It also depends on our coping skills, it depends on how we are hardwired, it depends on our biology as well. Right? So there is a biological component to anxiety, where neurotransmitters in the brain and the levels of what you call, if we talk in simple language, chemicals in the brain, if there's an imbalance, or if there's sometimes a abnormal secretion of hormones, certain hormones like adrenaline, which is the what we call a stress hormone, then there's a chance of people developing greater anxiety, right? And then of course, genetics also has a part to play in it, because if you're brought up by people or parents or other family members who might have a lot of anxiety, we learn over time that is the way to function, right? So we develop those traits from family and parents and etc. So also another perspective is Semal, that we live in a world which is hyper connected, right? So if you look at social media, for example, we are always connecting, right? But the irony is that in this age of hyperconnection, where we are always connected on our devices to people, there's also a massive sense of disconnection and isolation and loneliness that people are experiencing. Especially if you look at the corporate world, because this is relevant to the startup community as well, plus general population, amongst especially young people, there's a massive sense of loneliness, right? Even though we are always hooked on social media or our devices, there's very little time that we spend interacting face to face and really connecting with someone face to face. So that also is a contributor to increasing of anxiety these days, where we also tend to compare, like you said earlier, we tend to compare ourselves a lot with other people, which affects self-esteem, but it also affects anxiety, because we might always worry, why am I not doing this, or how can I do better, or do I need to do better? Is this person doing better than me? This person seems to be really happy from the pictures they put up, but my pictures are not that great, or I don't get enough likes on my post, whereas my friend gets a lot of likes. So all of these things would contribute to, anxiety developing for me.
Yeah, and I think what you touched upon is very important, because in today's world we are constantly hooked on the social media, and the social media projection is like the perfect, our perfect photos are in social media, and you see everyone else's like perfect photos, but obviously life is not all perfect moments. There are imperfect moments, there are all kinds of moments. And so can you just, is there any research, because recently I read that, actually after scrolling through Facebook, your level of happiness is actually lower in a lot of cases. So could you just bring to light how social media is affecting mental health?
Yeah, I think it definitely has an effect. We've known that since social media began, that it has had effects on our mental health, because one thing is overexposure to the lot of negativity, because we see a lot of that on social media. Can also be quite difficult for us emotionally, right? And the second thing is it creates it creates a system where we escape or avoid situations that really bother us, and we don't deal with those situations, but we escape into social media. So that causes a very unhealthy way of coping for us, where we kind of learn to escape or to avoid issues by maybe venting on social media, or looking at social media as a way of distraction. So we are not really dealing with the problems that we might have, right? And then of course, what I said earlier about how it affects our self-esteem, I think that is one of the major things that affects people's mental health, where the number of comments, or the number of likes, or the loves on your social media, or the number of retweets on Twitter, or the number of likes on Instagram contributes a lot these days to people's self-esteem, where they believe that the more likes I get, the more people like me, or the more people are paying attention to me, and therefore but it's of course a bit of a false sense of self-esteem, because soon as that is taken away, it's going to crash again, right? So that is an issue, because our self-esteem as a society, I think, has or is affected, where constantly there's a lot of pressure to perform and do things, but when you can't, or when it's difficult for you, there is no alternative given to us. There are no alternatives given to people on how to cope with failure, for example, but it's all about success, even in the corporate world, right? So that is another thing that causes a lot of anxiety and stress, because then we also see a lot of people succeeding and doing well, getting awards, this and that on social media, and that then it creates this question for you, why not me? Why can't I do these things?
So I mean, and like you said, burnout is increasing all around the world, and that's because of stress, and it's also because you're comparing yourself constantly to so many people on social media. So you spoke some about self-esteem being really important, and when the social media is not there, what are some practices you can use to internally build your self-esteem up?
I think a lot of that starts from, for example, when we're at school, or even before that, where sometimes our self-esteem depends on how well we do in certain things, or how popular we are in school, or how wealthy our parents are in Sri Lankan context. So, and our teachers and other adults around us play a very vital role in us either having healthy self-esteem, good self-esteem level, which is not too high or too low, or they completely would contribute to bringing it down, which is the case for a lot of young people these days, where you're constantly put down, bullied, punished, and you learn at a very young age that you're not worthy, or you're not good enough, which a lot of young people have difficulties with. So that kind of progresses into adulthood as well, or with different experiences one would have growing up, right? And the different messages you hear from parents, teachers, other people, and social media and the internet, right? And the media, of course. So two things can happen. Either you develop a healthy sense of self-esteem where you're given the right tools and the right messages in order to have a realistic view of yourself as a person, or you develop a very distorted view of yourself because of negative messaging that you get growing up. So to answer a question about what we can do, little things we can do, I think one thing is to really look at what your strengths, assets, abilities are, while not comparing yourself to other people, and say that okay, what I have is mine, I own it, and it's okay. Maybe I can develop them, but I don't have to put myself down because someone else may be doing a little better than me. But that is only my perspective. Whereas if someone else looked at the both of us, me and another person, they would probably think differently, right? Mm-hmm. So what I believe about myself at my core. Now, for example, if I develop a very strong negative belief from childhood saying I'm not good enough, that is going to seep into everything that I do, including how I view myself, right? So, for example, if that is a belief I have and I see something on social media where this other person has won an award for something, which I also do, that belief would get activated immediately and say, you're not good enough. And that will spiral into my self-esteem dropping, I'm feeling low, me feeling like I'm not worthy, and so on. So, to really look at what your strengths and abilities are. And the second thing is to regulate how you use your devices and your social media. So you can't say don't use it, but regulate it so that you have a realistic perspective of what's going on around you and with yourself. Apart from that, I think it's always good to maybe have a practice like journaling, where you journal or write about what you feel and also about what you're good at, about what in the past, the good things you've done, or the good, things that you've been good at, right? And have again realistic, so that would also lead to a more, realistic picture of yourself with clarity, rather than having a big jumble in your head about what's going on for you.
Thank you everyone for watching. And thanks a lot, Nivendra, for joining us today. And please, if you would want to say something about the Ohana project, that would be good.
Yeah, so the Ohana project is always there for you. You can reach us on Facebook, you can find us on Instagram, and you can email on the Ohana project sl@gmail.com, and we'll always be there to support you in whatever way we can.